On the surface, the 1982 Formula One season looked like a thriller. A record 11 different drivers stood on the top step of the podium as 4 different, almost evenly matched teams did battle for the championship, and the driver's title went down to the wire. However, we must remember what the year truly was. It was a season of politics, scandals, and tragedy. In the early stages of the season, Canadian Gilles Villeneuve was looking strong until he was killed at the Canadian Grand Prix. 3 races later, rookie Riccardo Paletti also lost his life. Even when the tragedies were over, the accidents weren't, as then championship leader Didier Pironi suffered severe leg injuries at the German Grand Prix and never raced an F1 car again. And all this was going on in front of the backdrop of strikes and the bitter FISA-FOCA dispute. However, Formula One raced on, and a duel for the crown commenced between Finnish Keke Rosberg and Northern Irish John Watson. Neither had won the World Championship before, and neither would ever get an opportunity to do so again. They had to do it now, and all Rosberg needed to do was finish 6th or better. So, what would be the stage for this duel of a lifetime, this showdown for the ages, this light at the end of a 1982-shaped tunnel?
Heaven help us, a car park in Las Vegas!
Everyone, please welcome my good friend Chris Whitfield, who suggested that I should cover this Grand Prix. Chris, what do you think of the Caesar's Palace track?
Wow. Having watched both Formula One races at Caesar's Palace, what else can I say but wow. I heard legend about these races, but I never knew they were that bad until I watched them both for myself. Where did this idea even come from? A World Championship Formula One race held in, of all places, the rear parking lot at Caesar's Palace. This might have worked if it was buried in the middle of the calendar, but as the finale? That being said, there's a certain curious quality to these races in 81 and 82. Sort of a so bad it's good quality, if you will. I recommend watching these races if you have a curiosity for bad races.
Thanks, Chris. So, since this is the last round of the championship, let's have a look at some of the drivers who never raced in Formula One again. Derek Daly went on to have an unsuccessful kart career before becoming a commentator and being fired for racist comments he'd made 35 years before.
Brian Henton went back to running a car dealership, and now hosts occasional equestrian events at his home.
Rupert Keegan raced in kart and endurance racing and worked as a racing instructor.
Tommy Byrne, who is regarded by many to be the best driver never to get a full-time Formula One seat, went on to race in America for many years and was the subject of the documentary Crash and Burn. Get it?
However, alongside these lesser names was 1978 World Champion Mario Andretti, who was standing in for Pironi at Ferrari. This would be his last Grand Prix, but he would then go on to win the IndyCar Championship in 1984 and win the WSC class at Le Mans in 1995. He was also inducted into the Indy 500 Hall of Fame, the International Motorsports Hall of Fame, the US National Sprint Cars Hall of Fame, the Automotive Hall of Fame. He was awarded the Commendatore in Italy, and he was mentioned in Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted.
Marty, just call me Mario Andretti. No, you're Suckio Andretti.
The two Renaults took 1-2 on the grid in qualifying, giving the team their 12th pole from 16 races. On this occasion, Prost was ahead of Arnoux, and then third was Michele Alboreto, previously seen on this series finishing on the podium at Detroit. Fourth on the grid was Eddie Cheever's Ligier, and the championship protagonists Rosberg and Watson started 6th and 9th respectively. It was looking good for Rosberg. Also to note is that 6 drivers failed to start, as Chico Serra, Alicio Salazar and Teo Fabi failed to qualify, Jean-Pierre Jarier had an accident in warm-up, Roberto Guerrero's engine was unwell, and Patrick Tambay was just plain unwell.
This was unfortunate, as it was also to be the final races for the single-car Fittipaldi and Ensign teams. Sadly, both cars were non-starters.
When the race began, Prost maintained his lead from the very French front row, and Arnoux got away well behind him. Rosberg ran wide to keep out of trouble at turn 1, and Alboreto held on to third as Cheever was mugged by Patrese in the Brabham. Watch as well as Andretti makes his way up into the points in the Ferrari, knocking Rosberg down to 7th. The two Renaults immediately began to accelerate away from the field, just as they had done at several other Grand Prix that year. Speed clearly wasn't an issue for them, so now they just had to make sure that they could finish the race. If they finished 1-2 and Ferrari didn't score, then they would be Constructors' Champions, and with Tambay not starting and Andretti down in 6th, it wasn't beyond the realms of possibility. Somewhere along the line, Alain Prost had already taken the lead from teammate Arnoux as well, but for the life of me I can't seem to find it on camera. 80s cameraman, am I right? Seriously, what is the point of this camera shot? The cars are nothing but little blurred specks amidst a sea of dull. How am I supposed to make out a race from this? I shouldn't have to decode and interpret what I'm seeing when I'm trying to watch a flippin' car race. Ah!
So here we see Keke Rosberg currently running in championship winning position and unless I'm very much mistaken, he has melted into the tarmac. Dearie me, we might as well have been watching ice hockey.
Meanwhile, both championship contenders were outside of the points, but up ahead of them, a battle was being fought over 5th place, with Andretti taking a look around the outside of Cheever's long boy Ligier. This encouraged Cheever to get a move on, and before long, they had Patrese in their crosshairs. Patrese, Cheever, Andretti, Rosberg, Keke, all in a line, all doing fine. Keke Rosberg then made a move on Andretti's Ferrari for the last points paying position up the inside. Goodness, that's close! And I've got no idea how they didn't make contact there as Andretti defended robustly. Remember, Keke is fighting for a championship here, heck. After an uneventful start to the race, the first proper casualty came on lap 9 when Nigel Mansell spun into the catch fencing, kicking off today's crunch count.
Oh, come on, chaps. The car's a piece of rubbish. I've only had one podium this year. Today I had to start from 21st, and now I can't even finish. The car's all broken. I need a drink.
This would sadly be the last Grand Prix witnessed by Lotus boss Colin Chapman, who died in December. As Cheever continued to run well in his 5th place, his teammate Lafitte was ailing several laps down, and finally his ignition gremlins got the better of him. This was his 11th retirement in 15 races, with unreliability definitely holding him back in 1982. Come to think of it, that may also be one of the reasons he went to Williams for 83, although that didn't end up going much better for him. Talking of Cheever, he's still stuck in 5th place behind Patrese, and probably knows that Brabham's rear wing like the back of his hand by now. Oh, he's taking a look, and nope. What is it with all of the speculative glances in this race? Meanwhile, John Watson had caught up to Rosberg and Andretti, and he knew that he had to get past them to have a sliver of a chance to win the championship. He took a quick look, but close enough, Watty was naughty. It may have been a long shot for Watson, but this was close. The two championship protagonists were right together, and if they collided, then Rosberg would win it on the spot, so Watson needed to get through cleanly. On the other hand, Keke knew that Watson had to win the race, so his only job was to hold John up as much as possible for as long as possible. All eyes were focused on two battles, this one and the one still raging for 4th place right there. The two Renaults were still comfortably leading the race, a long way ahead of anyone else. However, unseen by the cameras, Alboreto was closing in. I'm not sure if there were team orders in the Renault team back then, but I presume it was along the lines of whoever leads after the first lap wins, since Prost doesn't appear to be attacking Arnoux. It had been a strange year for Renault, as they'd won more silverware and pole positions than any other team, but inconsistency had plagued them, and they were only 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, albeit poised to jump to 2nd, or even 1st if Andretti dropped back. However, look at this, here comes Alboreto! Now watch this, as Watson finally makes his move on Rosberg, catching him off guard and moving up into 7th position. So is Rosberg's championship over? Well, not exactly, as Watson still had 6 cars to pass, separated by 25 seconds, which is tough even with 60 laps remaining. All of a sudden, Alain Prost was back in the lead. This is honestly the third time I've watched through this race, and only the first time I've actually noticed this. I really wish the Renaults and their drivers' helmets didn't look exactly the same, but there we are. This swap was unexpected, and people began to speculate whether Arnoux was developing a problem. For the time being at least, he was holding second. Skipping ahead a lap, the next time the camera picked up Watson, he had already passed Andretti for 6th place. Notably, that meant that the Renaults were surprisingly in Constructors' Championship winning position, even though they still had Alboreto hot on their heels. Could we be in for a French triumph? The next time we saw Watson, which was just a few corners later, he'd got past Cheever too and was now up to 5th. Could he do what Cheever hadn't managed and get past Patrese for 4th, I wonder? Oh, well that didn't take long to answer, did it? On lap 18, Patrese pulled off into the pit exit and retired with a clutch issue, moving Andretti back up to 6th and Ferrari into Constructors' Championship winning position. Aye. This was Patrese's 11th retirement of the year, showing just how up and down his season was, as it was also the year where he'd taken his first Grand Prix win at Monaco. However, the Constructors' Championship drama didn't end there, as Freddie Arnoux developed an engine issue while leading the race and retired to the pit lane. What a massive shame for Arnoux, who had driven flawlessly up until this point. In fact, this was his last race for Renault, and he moved to Ferrari for the following year, where he achieved success and fought for the 1983 crown. More on that some other time. Back to Caesar's Palace though, Arnoux' retirement meant that Ferrari would win the Constructors' Championship so long as McLaren didn't win the race with both cars in the top 5, and with Lauda nowhere to be seen, this looked promising. Goodness me though, what a couple of laps. I've lost track of the order all of a sudden. Chris?
Well, Caitlin, it's Prost in first, who's now free to pull away from Alboreto. And good old Waddy is up to 3rd. Where did he come from?
On lap 27, a Legends F1 career ended as Mario Andretti's suspension broke, sending him careering out of the race. It was an unfortunate way to end a career in which he achieved 19 podiums, 18 poles, 12 wins, 10 fastest laps, and of course, the 1978 World Drivers' Championship. Judging by the replay, Keke Rosberg was lucky not to get involved as well, although it wouldn't have made much of a difference in terms of the championship.
Interestingly, Andretti would catch a red-eye flight to Michigan to race in a 150-mile IndyCar race. He finished 2nd after starting from the back due to a promoter's option.
Further back, a scrap was going on between Niki Lauda and an Alfa Romeo who I presume is Andrea de Cesaris. This went on for quite some time, despite the fact that Lauda is a lap ahead of the Alfa. Honestly, look at them go! Did de Cesaris even know what lap he was on? Who knows? Lauda may have been fighting for points and de Cesaris may have been outside of the top 10, but they were battling as if their careers depended on it. This was of course before the days of strict blue flag rules. They're still side by side, oh my word, and they always came together, and de Cesaris gets out ahead. My goodness. Also, Nelson Piquet and Elio De Angelis both retired with mechanical gremlins. Both had had mostly disappointing years in 1982 with 1 win apiece, albeit with that being De Angelis' first, and both would return in 1983 with their same teams. De Angelis would end up with an awful car, and Piquet would end up with a champion's ride. Also, how ironic is it that the John Player special car is smoking, right? Back to Lauda and de Cesaris, they're still going at it. Lauda up the inside, nope, de Cesaris shutting the door in true de Cesaris fashion. That is ridiculous. Beep beep coming through, finally. Yeah, that should do it. Jolly good. Here we see how lap race should be done, as Watson in 3rd place laps Daly in 7th. Derek Daly had a very underwhelming year, with a best result of 5th in a season where his teammate fought for the championship, although to his credit he was running 7th with a good chance of points in his final Grand Prix. On lap 41, Tommy Byrne, who was already running 2 laps down, ended his F1 career in the gravel. Chris mentioned earlier Tommy's documentary, Crash and Burn, which I've seen and actually didn't like. Personally, I think that what kept Tommy out of a full-time F1 seat was his attitude, because you can't just go around being disrespectful to everyone and expect life to be handed to you on a silver plate just because you're quick. Go and watch it and see if you agree. Anyway, we should take a look at Alboreto in 2nd. We haven't really seen much of the Tyrrell driver in this race so far, but he's been running superbly consistently and is actually beginning to catch Prost for the lead. Here he is just 3.5 seconds behind him, and here he is just a few minutes later, right under the gearbox of the Renault. This was an important fight as Tyrrell hadn't won a race in over 4 years, and Alboreto had never won a Grand Prix. The Tyrrell had been inconsistent so far in 1982, scoring just 1 podium, so both team and driver knew that they had to take it now. In fact, now that I say that, here you see him going for the move. He went to the right hand side of Alain Prost but had to back out for the little fast kink, but there was another braking zone coming up and Alboreto darted to the inside, catching the Renault driver off guard and making a fantastic move for the lead of the race. Just take another look at that move. Alboreto? More like Alboret totally committed. Even so, it was fairly clear that Prost was struggling on his tyres, and he later stated that this was because he'd picked up too many marbles and had begun to suffer from severe vibrations. And look at what's on your screen now! John Watson has passed Prost for second as the Renault driver continues to nurse his rattly tyres. And there goes Niki Lauda, retiring from the last Grand Prix of a solid return season to Formula 1 that had seen him take 2 victories. This elevated Derek Daly into the points, albeit with Daly running a lap down. Also here you see a quick glance of Manfred Winkelhock in the ATS. He's the yellow car who's just disappeared from your screen, running 12 laps down after sitting in the pits for several laps due to an unknown problem. You may delay him, but you can't break the Winkel Rock. Actually, talking of backmarkers, why don't we celebrate this season's minnow teams with a little poem? What do you think, Chris?
Actually, Caitlin, I've got just the thing. There was March, there was Ensign, there was Theodore Ford, who all raced in this series, but none of them scored. Team Tolman's car lumbered as big as a whale, and their straight-four Hart engine surely doomed them to fail. The Ford Fittipaldi had just 1 car to see, and just 1 point as well, in the Belgian Grand Prix. Alcella were slow since the season began, but scored 2 points at Imola, where just 14 cars ran. So there's your quick rhyme of your back markers, slow. Now back to Caitlin to finish the show.
Thank you very much, Chris. Anyway, back to Prost. He's really struggling badly now. This is 7th place Mark Scherer unlapping himself to the Renault, probably hoping Prost would hurry up and retire so that Mark himself could score a point. Also, look at Eddie Cheever approaching in the background. He could be on for a podium at this rate. However, we all know that it's one thing to catch the car in front and another thing entirely to pass them, and Prost was holding on for all his might from that long boy Ligier behind him. Eventually though, Cheever came through and took 3rd place away from the limping Renault, who was now almost a minute behind Alboreto. Anyway, at this very moment, Michele Alboreto crossed the line to win his first Grand Prix victory, and we missed it because the TV director thought we'd forget about Rosberg or something. It had been an incredible drive from the Italian, who won by a margin of 27.3 seconds ahead of John Watson, who had fought hard to win the championship but had come up short. 3rd was Eddie Cheever in the Ligier Matra, which was notable as it was the last Grand Prix for Matra engines, who eventually went defunct in 2003. All eyes though were on Kaijo Eric Keke Rosberg, who finished 5th to take his one and only World Drivers' Championship, becoming just the 2nd driver in history to take the World Championship with only 1 win in their winning season, and the 1st of all time to be champion with just 1 win so far in his entire career. He was also the first Finnish champion and, oh damn, I've just realised I missed out on making a finished first pun. Oh well. I'll give the Grand Prix a 7 out of 10 overall for its unpredictability, the way the momentum seemed to be swinging on a pendulum between various frontrunners, and of course the fact that it was a championship decider. I did, however, subtract 2 points because I found the race very difficult to follow due to the horrendous track layout and the awful cameras.
Well, Caitlin, my driver of the day is Michele Alboreto, and the reason for that is very simple. He was in a car that was theoretically not supposed to win, due to the fact that 1982 as a whole seemed to be mostly favoring the turbo cars, like the Renaults, the Ferraris, and the like, and his lowly, naturally aspirated Cosworth DFV-powered Tyrrell that's a mouthful, basically was the David among Goliaths in this event. And it wasn't through attrition or anything, it was basically him driving the nuts off the car. This was, I think, one of his best drives in Formula One.
I would agree with that, Chris, but I'm going to give my driver of the day to Eddie Cheever in third, who I think also drove the nuts of an under-fancied car and is equally worthy of driver of the day. I'll give my Inouye trophy for worst driver to Brian Henton, who we didn't see at all except in the background of some shots, who was lapped and failed to score points despite driving the same car as Alboreto, who won. Henton was dropped from his seat and replaced by Danny Sullivan for 1983, who sadly didn't do much better.
And Caitlin, the Inouye trophy I'm going to be giving to the Caesar's Palace circuit itself. Boy, oh boy. Having watched both of these races, along with both kart events that ran 2 years after the Formula One cars did, I can safely say that Caesar's Palace was one of, if not the worst circuits in Formula One, and also the one that was the most ill-conceived. It had no flow, and quite frankly, it had no challenge to it, apart from the heat. It was an absolute dog to sit through.
Thank you, Chris. Drive safely, guys, and I'll see you next time.